Hype is an interesting thing. In its wake, expectations are set unreasonably high for any future video game product, so much so that when the game eventually does come out, if it doesn't live up to the expectations set in the initial trailers, it will be met with mockery and derision as the mainstream gaming audience celebrates its failure. As much as I don't agree with how the hype cycle works, it is an unfortunate reality in a highly volatile industry in which one underperforming title can spell the end of your studio and your job. The video game industry of 2025 embodies this philosophy as quarterly reports of studio closures, layoffs, and canceled projects become the norm. It is under these conditions that Clair Obscur Expedition 33 was released. Expedition 33 was quickly heralded upon its release as a Game of the Year contender and a champion of success in spite of the big bad AAA video game industry. Gamers quickly held it up as a standard and used it as a cudgel to relentlessly mock an industry that they saw as flawed, cheering for games like Clair Obscur to bring about its downfall. Final Fantasy, if it was good, was a graphic I saw immediately after the game was released, and RPG fans everywhere took Expedition 33 as proof that Square Enix was wrong about turn-based combat. Amidst all of these conversations, there was little substance. What did Expedition 33 do in its design, gameplay, and themes to warrant such praise? Well, this podcast episode won't fully explore these themes. Please subscribe to the Unlockables YouTube channel for further analysis. It will seek to explore why we're having the conversations that are occurring around Expedition 33. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Unlockables podcast, the story of video games, the people who play them, and the memories made along the way. As always, I'm your host. My name is Eric. I'd like to thank you so much for tuning in wherever, whenever, in time and space you may be located. It means so much to me that you're willing to stop by and check out what is going on with the show and what is going on in the world of video games. Before we dive into our episode today on Clair Obscur Expedition 33, I would just like to direct you to our link tree, linktr.ee/Unlockables podcast, to check out all the links to the social media, my Instagram, Blue Sky, all that fun stuff. Check out the link to the Discord channel and the Unlockables Patreon. Those are the best ways to keep up with what is going on with the show on a daily basis. And if you're interested in any additional content, you can go on over to the Patreon page and support the show for a little bit extra. Of course, this is not required. All of the main content that you have come to know and love from the Unlockables will remain on the main feed. Extra stuff just gets thrown up on the Patreon whenever I have the time to do it. And you even get access to these episodes a little bit early. So that is linktr.ee/Unlockables podcast, Blue Sky, Instagram, Discord link, Patreon, all that fun stuff. And of course, you can find all the links to wherever the podcast is available, which should be on most, if not all, podcatcher platforms. Now, with that being said, let's start our discussion on today's episode, Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Obscur Expedition 33 is a role-playing game developed by French studio Sandfall Interactive and published by Kepler Interactive. Sandfall is a relatively new studio formed of 12 former Ubisoft devs along with other people in the industry that were known by the game's director Guillaume Broche, creating a core team of about 30 people who were consistently working on the game. Sorry in advance if I butcher any of the names. Once again, I am an ignorant Midwestern American. As much as I look up the pronunciation, I still end up getting it wrong. So I apologize in advance. I mean no offense. Kepler Interactive is a British-based game publisher located in London. It was founded in 2021 and is co-owned by a group of independent game developers. You may have heard of them before, as they've published some titles such as Gia, Scorn, Sifu, and now Expedition 33. The core Sandfall team consists of these individuals who were most in the news for being the leaders around their development. Once again, I apologize for any butchering of names. Of course, we have director Guillaume Broche. We have producer Francois Meurice. Designers on the project were Guillaume Broche himself and Michel Nora. Programmer was Tom Gierman. Artist was Nicolas Maxen Francom. And writers were Jennifer Svedberg-Yen and Guillaume Broche. The game was created in Unreal Engine 5 and was released for PlayStation 5, Xbox, and Windows on April 24th, 2025. Here are some review scores from some contemporary outlets. On Metacritic, the game is sitting at a 91 out of 100 on PC, 93 out of 100 on PS5, and 91 out of 100 on Xbox. Edge gave it a 10 out of 10. Eurogamer gave it a 4 out of 5. Famitsu a 36 out of 40. Game Informer 9 out of 10. GameSpot 9 out of 10. IGN 9 out of 10. Games Radar Plus 4.5 out of 5. And The Guardian 4 out of 5. Expedition 33 sold 500,000 units in 24 hours, eclipsed 1 million units in 3 days, 2 million units within 12 days, and as of May 27th, 2025, surpassed 3.3 million units globally. The game's success caught the attention of French President Emmanuel Macron, who called it a shining example of French audacity and creativity, which, super cool. Games celebrated as part of a country's culture. Very, very awesome thing. Very cool. Big, big win for those of us who consider games as art, games as culture. I think that, not spoiling some of my thoughts upcoming here, that Expedition 33 is such a positive expression of French culture. It's very, very cool to see this game come out of this part of the world. Similarly to this, the mayor of Montpellier said Expedition 33 would be a reference in the international history of video games. The structure for this episode is going to be a little bit different. We're actually going to talk about development at the very top here. Usually I go into like my spiel about some of my thoughts and experiences with the game. I don't have any coming in because this is the first time this game in this series has ever come out. I remember seeing a trailer for it maybe several months ago, and it kind of just slipped into the back of my mind just because so many things are going on. And then obviously when it came out and the hype train kind of started building and left the station, that's basically my entire experience with Expedition 33 before it came out. You don't need to hear me recount my history of RPGs for the millionth time on this show, but I'm going to actually talk about the development first, because rather than kind of dive into the themes and story bits and all this stuff on this podcast episode, I'm going to be doing that over on my YouTube channel, where I have a essay analysis breakdown of some of the themes of Expedition 33 that really caught me by surprise, really caught my attention. So I'd like to direct you over to the Unlockables YouTube page, which is just, I think, youtube.com/@theunlockables, or however that's laid out. It has my noticeable joystick icon on the channel when you search it. So just go over there, check that out if you want a more in-depth discussion on the themes and analysis of Expedition 33. The reason I'm going to talk about the dev history first is because I really want to hone in on this podcast episode about the conversation that has been happening around this game in regards to everything that's going on with it, in regards to the video game industry as a whole, because I have some thoughts on that. And I figured to be able to do that here on the podcast episode and then do my theme analysis over on my YouTube channel was the best way to go about talking about everything that I wanted to for this game, because it's got a lot to talk about and I'm very excited to. But before we get into the development, let's go ahead and hear from the members of the Unlockables community who once again submitted their thoughts on Expedition 33.
Hey folks, Matt, aka Stormageddon here again, one of the hosts of Fun and Games and the Reignite podcast, here to talk about Clair Obscur Expedition 33. No, I'm not going to do a French accent. We would all be worse off for it. But I'm excited to talk about this game at length whenever anyone will listen. And so I'm grateful for Eric to give me this platform to chat a little bit about it here. This game is huge for me for a lot of reasons. I do think it's definitely one of the greatest turn-based RPGs ever made and one of the best narratives in video games. It's easily in my top 10 games of all time and is kind of a revolutionary game for our time. Not for all the reasons I think other folks are hyping up for, but I think there are a lot of valid points as far as storytelling, smaller teams, and just really focusing in on wanting to tell a narrative and cobbling together the mechanics that work in a way that are synergistic. I love the combat in this game, though I bounce off it at times. Being able to dodge and the dodge being more forgiving made it more engaging for me. I really love the world building, the characters. Minoko might be one of my favorite characters in all of RPGs, and he definitely has one of the best theme musics, plural? Sure, why not? One of the best themes in all of video games. His music slaps and goes hard, and I can't help but put the controller down and listen to it every time I have to fight him, which happens several times in this game. I don't want to talk too much about the narrative because I don't want to spoil it. I'm sure Eric's going to get into it here, but just in case, I just think that the twists and turns that the story have, I never saw coming, and were quite incredibly done. Again, the cast, the heartbreak that you witness from basically the opening moments all the way through to the end of the game pulled at my heartstrings in a way that I really resonated with. I love a heartfelt and painful story because I love having my heartstrings pulled. I'm a real easy cry, and this game does that. The other reason this game is really hugely important to me specifically, and if I can share a personal story for just a moment, is my spouse, the incredible Sarah Storm, actor extraordinaire and creator of podcasts as well. She doesn't play a ton of video games. Being married to me, she has been exposed to several and has played some, and I would say is a casual video game player. Loves games like Spiritfarer, Control, a bunch of walking sims like What Remains of Edith Finch, and Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, but is very narrative focused and doesn't tend to play a lot of mechanically dense games. Used a lot of accessibility options and control to be able to get through that game, which is a valid way to do it. However, just watching me do the opening prologue of Expedition 33, Sarah became obsessed. She's like, I want to play this game. This game looks incredible. And proceeded to do that. She has now gone on to beat super bosses, finish the entire game, and became obsessive with it in a way even beyond me, where she would continue to play it after she had beaten it. Unlike me, I put the controller down once I finished the story, and loves it and is really excited to play other games like it. And the thing that gets me so excited is this is Sarah's first turn-based RPG ever, full stop. It's the first one she's ever played, which, while yes, that's a pretty high bar, is so exciting because I have literally a library of at least a minimum of 50 games, probably more, RPGs specifically, that I can direct her to play that she might enjoy. Metaphor ReFantazio, the Persona games, all sorts of stuff. Sea of Stars, Chained Echoes. It's just such a cool thing as a partner to get to see the joy I have for something in someone else, to get to talk about it on a level that we never had before because she didn't have the context for it, using RPG terms like grinding and leveling and, stat building, things that we just never discussed before, and to just see the excitement, to see her also get it, understand why I love these things so much and why they're so important to me. And so this game will always have a special impact on my heart because of that moment that me and Sarah got to share, and will continue to share as now she expands her experience with this kind of game genre and maybe others beyond. So anyway, this is a really special game for a lot of reasons. I'm so glad to be even a small part of this episode, and shout out to Eric and the Unlockables audience. Y'all rock. This show rocks. Thanks for your time. And for those who come after.
Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is truly one of the most amazing games I've ever played. That's very lofty praise to give, and to understand why I'm giving it, I feel like I have to rewind the clocks back about 25 years. It was the summer of 2000, and I had just moved into a new city. I didn't have many friends, but I started making acquaintances in the neighborhood that I moved into. And I had a buddy who invited me over for a sleepover one night, and he said, "Hey man, I have this new game. I want you to check it out, see what you think." have you ever heard of this game called Legend of Dragoon? I'm like, no, what is it? He goes, well, it's an RPG. And I said, what the hell is an RPG? I had never played an RPG before, didn't know what the game type was. I was used to your annualized sports games like Madden or NBA Live or Triple Play Baseball, or racing games like Gran Turismo, or third-person action games like Metal Gear. I had never dived into an RPG or knew what it was. So fired it up and I was instantly blown away. I loved the graphics, I loved the story, I loved the characters. I really, really enjoyed the combat. It was unlike anything I had ever played before. Needless to say, I was hooked. Later that summer, the man that I now call my best friend and my brother got me into what is the greatest RPG series, in my opinion, Final Fantasy. And I started with Final Fantasy IX. And just like Legend of Dragoon, I was immediately blown away. I love the story, the concepts, all the backgrounds, the music, the characters, again, the combat. I was completely hooked and drawn in immediately. From there, I played other games in the Final Fantasy series, like 8 and 7, and I finished those just in time to play what is my favorite game in the Final Fantasy series, Final Fantasy X. And I thought that those games were probably going to forever be the peak of RPGs. There could be nothing better. Well, lo and behold, this year we had the release of Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Truly a phenomenal game. I don't even know where to begin. Yes, it's effusive praise, but let me try my best to break down why I love this game so much. I first have to start with the music. The piano, all of the songs that have a choir in them, even the little bits of electric guitar that you can hear strewn about several of the tracks, or each character having their own battle theme music. Truly, truly some of the best music I've ever heard in a video game. The characters are absolutely phenomenal. Top tier voice cast that really brings these characters to life. I absolutely am just awed by how beautiful this game looks. The graphics are completely some of the best I've ever seen in a game. You'd almost think that they're damn near painted. If you know, you know. Also, the story of this game. Sure, it can be boiled down to some of the same tropes that you see littered through other RPGs or JRPGs, but it does it in a new and refreshing way, and something completely unexpected for me. This game pays a lot of homage to the games that came before it, the ones that I mentioned already, Legend of Dragoon and the Final Fantasy series. And I love that it was able to allow me to kind of tap back into that 14-year-old version of myself from the summer of 2000 and completely enjoy my time with this. I had times where I felt wee and times where I felt woo. But more often than not, there were times that I felt wee. This was a game that came out of left field for me. I hadn't been keeping any tabs on it, but I'm so glad that so many of the people in this very Discord community and other ones that I'm a part of kept singing its praises, and I knew that I had to get my hands on it, and so glad that I did.
Hello, Eric. Hello, Unlockables podcast. It's me, ya boy, Thrackington, here talking about Clair Obscur Expedition 33. I won't go into too much detail because I am currently doing a series with Pixel Project Radio about Expedition 33, but a quick summation of my thoughts are it's one of the best JRPGs made in the last probably 10, 20 years, and is a game I'm curious to see where its legacy goes as we get, say, out of the decade, and just thinking about where JRPGs are going, because I think this game could be a watershed moment for the entire genre as a whole series. A part of me hopes this doesn't become a series, but I think that's another thing to talk about. But yeah, it's a really good game. I hope more people get to play it and truly experience the fantastic nature of this game. And I'm very curious to what Sandfall does beyond this. So, yeah. Love you!
Oh, ho, ho. Je suis Chris Goblin from the Retro Hangover podcast. I have not played this game. I am probably using a terrible French accent. But you know what? We need more turn-based RPGs. So I hope that this episode is good. No. So, smoke your cigarettes, piss in the street, and eat your baguette. France. It's France.
What's up, Unlockables listeners? It's Dave Jackson from Tales from the Backlog, here to talk about my experience with Clair Obscur Expedition 33. And Eric told me I have at or around 5 minutes to talk about that, which is damn near impossible because of how complicated my thoughts and feelings about this game are. And when I say complicated, I don't mean lots to love and lots to hate. I mean, there's just so much to talk about with this game, and I love damn near everything about it. So I was going about, writing down some notes and thinking about how do I want to approach talking about this game that I played for 60 hours in 5 minutes, and it really came out looking like wedding vows, so I'm going to lean into that. Clair Obscur Expedition 33. I love your combat. I love the combination of active defensive maneuvers in combat and a really deep system on offense. I love the character building system. I love how min-maxy I got when I was facing the final optional bosses, the hardest fights in the game. I love everything that went into making the characters as deep and rich as they are. From the animations of their faces, the subtle looks that they give, including one look that I got from a character at the ending that I will probably never forget. And it wasn't something that a character said, it was just a look they gave me. I love the writing, I love the way the dialogue works, I love the way the characters talk to each other the way real people would in real life sometimes. I love the voice acting. Ben Starr, Jennifer English, Andy Serkis, Kirsty Ryder, Shala Nix, and so on, and Charlie Cox, of course, turn in unbelievable performances bringing these characters to life, but it's not a game that lives and dies solely on voice acting. It's all of those disciplines together, the writing, the facial capture, the animations, the voice performances, the direction. It's fantastic. I love the way that Clair Obscur takes well-trodden tropes within the genre and not like avoids them, but kind of leans into them and subverts them. The tropes that you think of when you think Japanese RPGs, you think of certain things. You think of fighting God at the end of the game, and so on and so on. And that's not to say that Clair Obscur avoids these things. In fact, it seems to embrace them, but does it all in such a unique way, turning some of these things on their head while clearly being referential to the games that inspired the people who wrote the game in the first place. It's a balancing act, and it never comes out as like we're copying other games. It comes out as a wholly unique thing that I love to death. Continuing with the vows here, I love how sad this game is. I am a recreational sadness enjoyer. I love when a game fucks me up. And I love how Clair Obscur did that over and over and over again. Whether it's through the big moments like the famous, the stuff at the end of the prologue, the stuff later on that I don't know how Eric feels about spoilers here, so I'm going to hold it. You know what I'm talking about if you played the game. I love that stuff. But I also love how there's a lot of levity and comedy in the game as well, from certain characters in the main party and moments that they have, but also the gestural characters and the audacity to have platforming challenges in this game that clearly has terrible platforming. When you walk into a gestural beach and you see a giant platforming challenge laid out for you, that's comedy, that's comic relief. I laughed when I walked into those rooms, and I love the way that the game is the most serious, the most sad, most of the time. But you have these little pockets of pure comedy and joy in there too. And that stuff really worked for me as well. And Clair Obscur, hey, I'm not done yet with the vows. I love the music. Lorien Testard, Jesus Christ. First video game that this person has ever been featured on, and it feels like they got the keys to the car and they exploded into a big fireworks show of the coolest music in a video game that I've heard in a long time. All kinds of genres, all kinds of feeling, all kinds of leitmotif woven in throughout the game. It is an absolute pleasure. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is an absolute pleasure. It is by far my favorite game I've played in 2025, regardless of release year. I love this game to death, and I love the Unlockables podcast. Eric, thank you for giving me the chance to do this for these new runs of the show here. For those who don't know me, I'm Dave Jackson. I'm the host of Tales from the Backlog. If you like long-form critical discussion podcasts about specific games, such as Clair Obscur Expedition 33, you can find that on my show with no spoilers in each episode for a while. So for example, Clair Obscur Expedition 33, there's a 3+ hour discussion going up on my feed in mid-July. Depending on when you hear this, it might be there or you have something to look forward to. That's on Tales from the Backlog, wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Thanks, Eric. See you next time.
So right off the bat, we're talking about the development, right? And the first immediate conversation that started happening around this game, as soon as it came out, as soon as people started playing it and looking into it, was, oh, this game was made by only 30 people who left Ubisoft. And that immediately turned into, oh, you see, AAA gaming, like, take that. That's why you suck at making games. And people should just be in smaller teams and you should just let people do what they want. Which, listen, I agree with a lot of that sentiment at face value, but this argument as a whole of, oh, only 30 people made the game is disingenuous and it lacks nuance, and people just want to seize on that number, on that small team size, and use it to dunk on AAA game studios, which, again, believe me, I am no friend to the AAA game studios, to the industry. I just went off on a massive rant on multiple Discord servers last week when Xbox laid off like 9,000 people. So I'm by no means friends to the corporate video game industry. But I want people to understand the context in which the game was made to better appreciate the game on its own, rather than like holding it up and using it as a tool to bludgeon the industry. You know how these people are. They'll just take things out of context and use them to serve their own videos and their own episodes and stuff of just like rage baiting anger to feed the masses out there who just want any excuse to hate on modern video games that they can get. I want to use my show, my platform, to provide context and nuance around the discussions that happens around these games so we can understand why these things are being said, what these games are doing, all that good stuff. So, to start things off, it is true that the core Sandfall Interactive development team was around 30 people. I believe it was like 34, I believe was the final count. But because of the backing of Kepler Interactive, which Sandfall secured with the demo of this game, they were able to get additional help by outsourcing work to outside teams. For example, there was like an 8-person team based out of Korea that worked on like gameplay animations. There were obviously outside QA testers and people who worked on localization. The core music team worked directly for Sandfall, and that, of course, included Lorien Testard. But there are numerous musicians credited in the credits. So the number of people who had input and put hands on this project was well over 30. So that narrative around, oh, the game was only made by 30 people is, like I said, it's disingenuous. But the accurate part of that statement is, it is true that the core group of Sandfall Interactive, that was the guiding force behind the project, was comprised of about 30-ish people. So that is the nuance and the context on the conversation. The game was not made by 30 people. The game was spearheaded by a team of 30 people who then contracted outside people to help make it. I mean, if you just finished playing the game and watch the credits, you'll see that way more people are credited with the creation of this game than just 30. The idea for Expedition 33 would ultimately be born out of the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2020, developer Guillaume Broche, who was working at Ubisoft at the time, had an idea for a game based on Final Fantasy, one of his favorite game series growing up as a child. And if you've played Expedition 33 before, you'll see that this influence is very, very apparent alongside many, many other games in the RPG genre. Broche was bored at work and he wanted to do something different, so he started to fire off messages, emails to colleagues, messages on Reddit boards for people to help him put together a demo of this idea that he had. This is where he met Jennifer Svedberg Yen, who agreed to do some voice work for Broche for free. Jennifer, in a great interview with Alexa Ray Correa on the Game Maker's Notebook, said that she signed up to do free voice work, and voice work is something that she had never done before. She was more traditionally a writer, but she was just like stepping outside of her comfort zone. During the COVID, she was just looking for something to do. She decided to try some free voice work and just give it to him. And she eventually ended up becoming more heavily involved in the project, and she would switch over from voice acting to a prominent writing role on the team. And if you haven't gone and listened to that interview between Alexa and Jennifer, Game Maker's Notebook, set up by the people who do the DICE Awards, the acronym, the name escapes me at the moment, but definitely go and check that out. It's really, really insightful. Jennifer talks about how, like, you know, she would sleep with like a writing pad by her bed. She'd wake up and like scribble notes down, how she would write all of these ideas, and they'd make all these incredible like game Bibles in the way that she had pages and pages of like lore and background for like each character. So I would highly recommend going to listen to that, because I think it sheds a lot of light on what writers for a video game like actually do. I think there's a lot of misconception of snobby people out there who are just like, oh, you're a writer for a video game, all you do is you just write the lines that they say and then you're done. It's like, no. When story is very important to a game, they write backgrounds and like familial trees for characters, and write very specifically at what these characters' morals and goals and feelings are, so that it provides context to the people performing the voices for these characters and for anybody else that is like touching these characters throughout the development process. So that's a very, very interesting interview. I'd definitely go check it out. Brioche used the demo to secure funding and backing from Kepler Interactive, and once this had happened, he was able to start recruiting people of like mind as him, and he grew the core team of Sandfall to about 30 members. So he was very specific and very choosy about the people that he chose to work with him, which I think led to a lot of synergy on the project and definitely is responsible for the outcome that we see. He attributed this to luck and to people at the time being restless during the lockdowns. They're looking for creative outlets. They're looking to channel their passions and their creativity during a time that was difficult for a lot of people. We're trapped in our houses. We're not really supposed to go anywhere. We're just going to work and going back home and spending a lot of time cooped up with a lot of anxiety and uncertain feelings as to the way that things are going to turn out. So we turn to passions and creative projects. This podcast is a product of the pandemic. This is kind of where it started and where it got its life from. Guillaume was good at finding people that aligned with his vision, and he went about finding them in unusual ways that went counter to the norm. Usually, if you're working on a big video game project, you're putting out just postings on message boards to hire a bunch of people and assign them to different jobs, where Guillaume seems like he was very particular and very specific about the way he went about approaching people and recruiting people, talking to them. I mean, like I said, he found Jennifer on Reddit, for goodness sake. One of the more interesting people from the team, Lorian Testard, who ended up being like the main composer. So Guillaume found composer Lorian Testard on SoundCloud, and during their first conversation, after Broche pitched him the idea, and him and Lorian were kind of just talking back and forth about some of the ideas and references and things that they were thinking about after the pitch. They were like on the same page almost immediately. So Broche brought him on to compose what would become one of the most fantastic pieces of video game music that I think I've heard in my entire life. And once again, I will talk a little bit more about the music in my YouTube essay. While the team did outsource work, Broche said that new advances in the tools used to make games allowed them to be really, really efficient with the work that they did as the core team. It allowed many members of the core team to wear multiple hats during development, and it's probably this efficiency and aligned vision that allowed them to keep costs lower, make the game that they wanted to, and as a result of keeping costs lower, be able to release the game at a $50 price point. And that is another thing that immediately got seized upon by everybody who just wanted to use Expedition 33 to shit on every video game that they felt wasn't worthy of their attention. They were holding it up and they were like, oh, look, this game's $50. See, the video game industry doesn't have to charge $70, $80 for these games that aren't nearly as good as Expedition 33. And listen, again, I am not on the side of the video game companies. I, too, advocate for lower price of video games. And this, and the conversation here, again, will become a little bit more clear once I kind of get all my thoughts out on the table, once I finish the dev history about $50 video games, why the cost was so low, all that stuff. Guillaume's motivation for Expedition 33 was to create a higher-end turn-based RPG because he felt that that genre had been neglected recently by big studios and had lived on only in anime-inspired JRPGs like Persona. Although I will say this, and I'll interject here because turn-based dead was kind of one of the... People were mad at Final Fantasy because this game exists because they were like, oh, see, this is proof that turn-based does exist and does sell well. If you're only playing like Final Fantasy and Persona and like the big RPGs that come out, you're missing a ton of really fantastic turn-based RPGs if that's your jam. Go play Octopath Traveler, right? Go play Unicorn Overlord. Go play Chained Echoes is a really fantastic, like old school, the way it's animated. It reminds me of like the golden age of Super Nintendo RPGs. Sea of Stars. There are turn-based games out there. They just aren't called Final Fantasy and Persona. They might be games that are just off the beaten path a little bit, more on the indie side. Just go and check those out, please. Please. Square Enix still has a turn-based game. It's called Dragon Quest. So turn-based games are not dead. You just want them in Final Fantasy. So that was the influence. They aren't shy about admitting this, that a lot of their influence comes from like the 7 to 10 era of Final Fantasy, arguably the best era, my favorite era in my opinion, as well as the style and camera work of the Persona series that you would see in the combat and the way the menus are set up. Other admitted influences were from Xbox era RPGs like Lost Odyssey and Blue Dragon, as well as obviously Sekiro Shadows Die Twice for the parry and dodging mechanics. The game originally started development under the codename Project W, with the original trailer showing off the game's setting of a steampunk version of Victorian England and boasting some more science fiction elements like aliens and zombies. While serving as a good foundation, people looking to invest in the project who first saw it urged Broche to think bigger. After they saw this initial idea, they were like, yeah, this is good, but we think this could be bigger. This could be better. Be more bold in your direction. And this triggered a hard reset for the narrative. Although some of the characters and elements did survive, it was kind of like a hard reset for a lot of the story that they had worked on before. And once again, Jennifer talks about this on the podcast interview that I mentioned earlier. Definitely go check that out. The new direction was inspired by a painting that Broche had seen and a short story that was written by Jennifer about an artist entering their own painting. So that has some interesting implications in the story there. The development originally began in Unreal 4, but transitioned to Unreal Engine 5 to take advantage of better technology like improvements in rendering and in animation. Unreal 5 also has a very extensive and robust library of ready-to-use assets that the team utilized more for backgrounds, and this enabled them to spend more time on the custom assets that they had to make from scratch. That really gives the game kind of its visual, artistic DNA. So use the ready-to-use assets on things that like don't matter, like just random rocks and stuff that you aren't really stylizing as much, and spend more time on the characters and the incredible skyboxes and backgrounds that really define this game. The game would go gold on March 22nd, 2025, which coincidentally, or maybe by fate, was 33 days before it was set to release. Kepler's financial backing ultimately allowed Sandfall to make the kind of game they wanted and gave them additional resources to spend on some pretty premium areas, such as the incredible voice cast that they assembled that featured the incredible talents of Charlie Cox, Daredevil, obviously, Andy Serkis from Lord of the Rings and Planet of the Apes, Jennifer English, who's best known as probably Shadowheart in Baldur's Gate 3, and she's also in Elden Ring and Divinity 2, and of course, the best boy, Ben Starr, who is Clive in Final Fantasy XVI, and also had a role in the first Berserker, Kazan. So yeah, the story around the development of this game is very impressive. The way that they were able to create it, the voice cast they were able to assemble, just everything around it just seems almost like a perfect storm, almost like a once-in-a-lifetime thing where just you have an idea, lightning strikes, all the people come together that you need to have, and it just comes out and is this incredible thing, right? Not to downplay any of the hard work that everybody did, because you can tell how much love and care went into every single aspect of this game. So I don't want to talk too much about plot, because I think the game is at its best when you experience it all for yourself for the first time, which I gotta say, by the way, during the course of my 40, 50, however many hours it was playing this game, I was really surprised at how restrained people were in sharing details about the story on social media. As a person that's on social media a lot for my job and constantly trying to keep up with everything that's going on, and of course the algorithm feeding me video game stuff, because video game stuff is most of the content that I consume, I didn't start seeing major spoilers around stuff until I was already done with the game for several weeks. So I must applaud the restraint of the community, or maybe I was just really lucky to be blessed with an algorithm that didn't feed me the spoilers, but I must applaud the restraint of the community, who just usually cannot contain themselves to posting everything like within hours of the game being released, because I think this game is at its strongest when you're able to go in and experience the story with no preconceived notions, because it's incredible. So we're going to touch on the general premise and the opening of the game, which I really want to focus on because I think it's one of the strongest hooks in any story or piece of media that I've experienced in a very long time. Like I said, I will have a companion YouTube essay coming out that will be an in-depth discussion of the story, the themes, some stuff that I noticed, some things that it meant to me personally. So look for that if you want more of my thoughts on the story and the themes and you don't have to worry about avoiding spoilers here, except for like, I'm going to just set up the main premise of the story, the main hook that happens like in the prologue. If you don't want to be completely spoiled by this at all, just skip ahead a little bit, or maybe just stop listening to the episode and then come back and listen after you've played the game. So the game starts in a city called Lumiere. It has very clear French design influences. There's like a melted over Eiffel Tower in the back. In this world, the people of this city live within the view of an entity called the Paintress, and a towering stone monolith that displays the glowing number 34. Every year, the Paintress, who is just kind of sitting hunched over in front of the monolith and only moves once a year. So at the start of every year, the Paintress rises from the base of the monolith and she paints a new number on it, decreasing it by 1 every year. This event is known as the gommage, which is a French word meaning to erase or to rub out. And everyone that is the age of the new number that is displayed on the monolith vanishes instantly. Infinity Gauntlet snap style, they disintegrate. Also, every year after the gommage, Lumiere sends out what it calls an expedition to the continent across the sea. And this expedition is mostly comprised of members of society who have 1 year left to live. So they will be the victims of the next gommage when the paintress paints the next lower number. Lumiere has been sending out these expeditions for over 60 years, and none have ever returned alive or to report anything about their adventures, about their time across the sea. We start off playing as Gustave, who is a member of the upcoming Expedition 33, and today is the day of the gommage when the game starts, and this is where the paintress will change the number 34 on the monolith to the number 33 and erase everyone of that age. Gustave is 32, so after this year, he will have 1 year to live. And Gustave is going to see a woman named Sophie, who he definitely has some history with and still has very strong feelings for her. And the scene and your interactions with Sophie don't 100% tell you that she is one of the many that will be disappearing in the gommage today. But you can definitely tell by the context of the scene that this is what is going to happen, and that this is Gustave's last opportunity to spend time with her and to say what he has to say before she's gone. The residents of Lumiere who are going to be gommage are marked by wearing necklaces of flowers so that the people who will remain behind can honor them and say their goodbyes. And throughout the day, they all make their way down to the pier in the Lumiere harbor where they will watch the paintress paint the new number and see all their loved ones disappear. So obviously Gustave and Sophie make their way through the city. You can talk to a bunch of people. You can just tell. You don't know that this gommage is going to happen, which I think is a brilliant part of the opening act. But you can definitely tell that the city is kind of somber and sad. It's just, there's a very specific kind of feeling that, again, I would urge you to play the game because it's unlike anything I've ever felt in the opening of a video game. So eventually we get to the time when the paintress rises and paints the number, and Gustave and Sophie can simply look at each other and their eyes saying everything that they need to say. They wish things could have been different. They wish they could have had more time to spend together. And as Sophie and the others begin to disappear, all she can do is assure Gustave that everything is all right. And again, the name of Sophie's voice actor escapes me. She does a phenomenal job. Charlie Cox, who plays Gustave, does a phenomenal job of selling this kind of inevitable sadness that happens every year where people get taken from them, but there's nothing they can do. And it's just a fact of life. And just the emotion in his voice at seeing this person he cares so much about disappear when maybe they would have had the rest of their lives to figure things out and maybe be together is heart-wrenching. It's heart-wrenching. After this, we get introduced to the other members of Expedition 33, including Maël, who will become a critically important character later, as well as Lune, CL, who will make up the other members of our party. And after we get introduced to this expedition, we have like a going away party the next morning. We depart for the continent, and that is where the true game begins. So when it comes to the plot, I wanted to talk about this intro specifically because I find the intros of video games so fascinating, because it's so often the intros of video games have to have a powerful enough hook to grab you for the rest of the game. If the beginning of the game sucks and is stupid, you're not going to want to finish the rest of the game because you're just like, oh, this is the foot that this game is getting off on. It's just not fun, not engaging, not emotionally connecting with you. Then why would I put my valuable time into finishing the rest of this game? The first level is bad. It's not fun. Why would I continue to play the rest of this level? It's the reason why World 1-1 is such a highly regarded, highly discussed intro level to a video game, because it's nearly perfect as to what a video game introduction should do in terms of gameplay things. the intro to Expedition 33 is perfect in terms of what a video game that has a strong narrative should do to hook players into playing the rest of the game. The intro is so powerful. There are so many incredible emotions and themes wrapped up in this build up to the Gommage. I was literally like on the edge of my seat, like choked up, breathing very fast the whole time. My heart was racing fast because I just knew something was going to happen. And guess what? It doesn't tell me this. It uses the environment. It uses the context of the conversations between the characters to communicate the story and its themes. There is no exposition during Gustav's time with Sophie about what is exactly going on. But as you journey with her to the docks, a melancholy atmosphere set by the surrounding environment and the incredible music tells you that something tragic is happening. And this is such a departure from the way all pieces of media are made these days. If this was made by anybody else or this type of story was being told, I guarantee you there would have been a section where somebody we had a conversation with would have told us to be like, oh yeah, all these people are going off to the Gommage. Sorry. And the Gommage is going to happen. And all the people that the paints the number for are going to disappear. We would have gotten like a 5-minute exposition thing, right? And this is like media to a T, because I don't remember where I heard this specifically. I think like Netflix released a report that said, and it basically goes like this. So characters in everything these days tend to narrate everything they are doing because so many people throughout the day put on shows or have things on a screen as background noise while they do other things, right? So if you're watching a TV show, and we do this all the time in my house, so I'm guilty of this too. We'll put on like a TV show or something that's on in the background, and I'm usually pretty good at following along with the plot and stuff that's going, even if I'm not engaging with it 100%, because I've found that there's so many times that the characters in these shows that are written today are just explaining what is happening on screen and explaining it multiple times so that you can be like, oh yeah, I look up and be like, oh yeah, that's what's happening because this character has exposited it to me 3, 4, 5 times now. And Netflix even confirmed this, that this is the way they make shows because they recognize that this is the way a lot of people engage with their content. They put it on in the back and go about their business, making dinner or cleaning the house or playing with kids or something. So in order to keep them engaged with the show, they have to make sure that the person who's watching it knows what's going on without them actually watching it. So they just have their characters just repeat things that are going on and just exposit things till they're blue in the face. And this is why Expedition 33 is brilliant, because it doesn't just withhold this information from you at the start. It does this for the entire story. It constantly holds back answers and informations to questions that you have until the opportune moment. And it uses the gameplay and the context of the story in this world and the art direction and the music to give the characters some inkling, some sense of what is going on. And then the player uses that to kind of figure out the context of the story. A character never stops one time to look at the camera and deliver any kind of exposition or any kind of explaining monologue about what is going on. That just doesn't do that. So when I say that introductions to video games are important, this is what I mean. Well, I do have the patience to go through the it gets good in 10 hours argument for games. My time is more limited now. I need a game to compel me pretty early on to devote some of my dwindling time to it. Game designers have known this forever. It's the reason that opening levels in games are some of the best, while sometimes there can be a pretty serious drop-off in quality later in that same game. The opening levels, the opening moments are key to convincing players to continue on with the game. And the opening of Expedition 33 is just so many things at once. It's beautiful in this kind of sad, melancholy way. It's tragic. It's thought-provoking. It is provocative. And it sets up a powerful story because it's a powerful intro that trusts the player. It trusts the player to figure out what is going on. it doesn't tell you a lot up front. It keeps things mysterious to pull you forward. And again, this is refreshing in this era of exposition and dumbed down content that we are living in right now, so that I can have a thing on in the background and know what is going on with it, so that I will keep watching and engaging with that platform. The intro is the foundation that supports the rest of this game. It allows for some of the crazier twists that occur in each act to land the way that they do, because from the prologue, the introduction of the game, it establishes trust with the player, that the player is smart enough to figure out what is going on based on context and based on all these other things, rather than a character just expositing information at you. The game trusts the player to understand the narrative and the themes. And because it does this, I think that the game earns some of the more crazy twists that it attempts to pull off in the future. It doesn't have to spend the time justifying those twists, because the game has trusted the player up until the point the twist happens, so they can move forward just focusing on telling the rest of the story, rather than having to grind the story to a halt, exposit everything, and then try to justify why that decision was made. I know there are certain points and certain twists in the game that we won't go into here that some people don't necessarily like. I know that Act 3 specifically, some people say that that act didn't land and it kind of skewed the momentum of the game a little bit based on everything that was happening before. I personally, while I was caught off guard by it, after I finished the game and took some time to process it, I came to appreciate the Act 3 twist and the kind of direction it took the narrative in, because up until that point, the game had trusted me to engage with it and understand it, rather than just it speaking at me as to what was going on. I was able to kind of figure it out myself. And even when I was caught off guard by the big Act 3 twist, I was able to pull back and think about it for a little bit and analyze the story. And then I understood what it meant in the bigger context of the game, because the game trusted me, and because the way it withheld information from me made me want to engage with it more, to figure out what was actually going on. And I think that twist and that trust is what ultimately makes the end of this game and the decision you face there so compelling. This is something that I do hope gets carried forward in video game storytelling. I hope that we get more narratives like this, more intros like this, more things that, game developers can craft this engaging narrative, this engaging intro, without having to feel like they have to tell their players everything up front. And if they look to do that, I think Expedition 33 is a perfect example of how to do that. I think it's great. I think it's brilliant. I think that should be the standard of the way things should be done when you want a narratively engaging game. Now, I understand that the narrative for Expedition 33 is very specific, and Expedition 33 does also have the advantage of being a completely fresh, new story IP in a landscape littered with sequels and remakes and old tired IP that people don't want to take a chance on anything else, because the current IP is proven to be a selling moneymaker. There are those caveats there, but this is one of the most compelling hooks, most compelling intros, one of the most brilliant openings to a game that I have ever experienced, period. And I would put the opening to Expedition 33 up there with some of my favorite openings in video games of all time. One of those is Final Fantasy IX, which I think has one of the most brilliantly executed, paced intro openings of any story ever. And the second, more controversially, is Kingdom Hearts 2, which I think has, once again, kind of fits into the same mold of Nomura trusting the player, not telling them everything, and just establishing that trust with them that they will figure it out along the line down the road for the payoff that comes at the end of the game. Expedition 33 does the same thing that both of those intros do, and I fucking love it for that. It's so good, and it establishes the way that the rest of the game is going to be for the rest of the game. It's so good. So now that I got my thoughts out about the game and the intro, and if that doesn't compel you to go play the rest of the game, just listen to me and go play the rest of the game. Seriously do it. Don't be intimidated about the difficulty or the combat or any of that stuff, or people being like, oh, some of the later bosses are really hard. This story is worth experiencing, even if you have to set it on easy. No one will judge you for setting it on easy. No one will ever know if you played it on easy. If you don't want to go out there and telegraph that you played it on easy, you don't have to play the game on the most ball-crushingly hard difficulty to be a gamer. You don't. I oscillated back and forth between normal and easy just because, like I said, I wanted to experience this game before I basically ran out of time with the birth of my second son. I know for a fact that if I hadn't switched between easy and normal during my playthrough, that I never ever would have finished this game before my second child got here, and I probably would still be trying to finish it now. So for this last part, and again, like I say, I'm really trying to make a conscious effort to keep my episodes around an hour so that it's more doable for me as a solo podcaster. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the discussions that were being had around this game and that are kind of still being had around this game, where that discussion kind of stands currently. And I know that as time goes on, there will be more better discussions that come out about this game. I know a lot of my content creator friends are going to be putting out episodes on these games. They're going to have some really, really great content, really, really great discussion. I know that will be coming, but the comments and the discussion that are happening in the comment sections of social media right now, that is where I wanted to touch on before I close this episode down. So, like I said, at the top of the episode, immediately as soon as this game came out, like the comment section was just a resounding refrain of Game of the Year. Game of the Year. This is my game of the year. It's better than Monster Hunter. It's better than anything that's come out. It's going to be better than anything that's ever come out. Like immediately started being compared to other games in context of the Game of the Year conversation. And to touch on Game of the Year, I understand that it is kind of like the big ritual that we all engage in at the end of a calendar year where we look back and see what game was considered the best game of that year, right? And I do this every year too. I engage with the pageantry of it. I engage with the ritual of it because as video game players, that's what we're expected to do. I've kind of been shying away from that in the last couple years just because I find the conversation around Game of the Year exhausting because the conversation around Game of the Year happens as soon as the year starts on January 1st of that year. And then every game that comes out is framed in this context of, is this game the game of the year? Is this game the game of the year? Oh, well, this game doesn't stand up to such and such game, which is my game of the year. And I don't know what it is about that conversation. Just like we're having that conversation so early. And that is like the surface level conversation we're having around these games is where it's being conversed about. Expedition 33 is being conversed about in comparison to how it stacks up to other games that have come out this year already and where it is going to rank on this arbitrary Game of the Year award scale that Jeff Keighley has fully sold to us that is like the most important conversation around video games. I think Game of the Year is pretty arbitrary and it's becoming to me a less and less important conversation every year as I get older because Game of the Year does not allow the game to be discussed in the terms that it should be discussed in. It is a game being discussed in the terms of how it stacks up to other video games. When the conversation I want to have around Expedition 33 is how the game stands on its own. What is it that makes people say, this is my game of the year? What are the things happening that are making people say, this is so great? Why are people using this to bash the AAA game industry? What are those elements of its DNA? Those are the more interesting discussions that I'm looking to have on the show. And by discussions, I mean me yelling at my soundproofed wall for an hour. So I just think that, and that's like all I see in the comment section is Game of the Year. It's better than this. It's compared to this. It doesn't stack up to this. Baldur's Gate 3 was better than last year. This game shouldn't have won. That game shouldn't have won. It hijacks the conversation and it's such like a shallow surface level conversation that I think it does injustice to a game as brilliant and well thought out as Expedition 33. I also, a common refrain around it was bringing this full circle. The way it was like immediately used as a cudgel to bash and make false assumptions about the Final Fantasy franchise. When this game came out, the second most common theme I read in comments and discussions online was, this is sticking it to Square Enix about turn-based combat. And this is proof that Square Enix needs to take Final Fantasy back to turn-based combat. This is the reason that Final Fantasy has been failing since Final Fantasy 13, is because there's been no turn-based combat. That is the reason why Final Fantasy hasn't been good since Final Fantasy 10 or Final Fantasy 7, is because there's been no turn-based combat. What's going on with Final Fantasy is so much more nuanced than they're not doing turn-based. There's so much around the conversation around Final Fantasy that people don't understand. To understand what is happening around Final Fantasy as a franchise, you need to understand the history of Square Enix itself, the history of the game series that was created by Hironobu Sakaguchi, the way that that company was kind of split into different teams once the PS1 era of Final Fantasy came about, the way that corporate wanted to take Final Fantasy in one direction and do more games like 7 and 8, the way that Sakaguchi wanted to do things in a different direction and do more games like 9, and then that's where Final Fantasy kind of lost its identity that people say that it doesn't have. And I would partly agree with that. Final Fantasy's biggest problem is that from game to game, it does not have a consistent identity. People saying something like they act like turn-based was just snatched away from them, when Final Fantasy has been all things other than turn-based for a lot. We've gotten like a tactical turn-based strategy game. We've gotten Final Fantasy fighting games. We've gotten a real live action game in Final Fantasy Type 0. So like Final Fantasy has had other forms of combat for a long time. And there's no understanding in the history of Square Enix as to why Final Fantasy is going the direction it was. It's because when Final Fantasy was gaining steam in the 90s and Square saw they could make all this money and Square was becoming more corporatized and the entire video game industry is becoming more corporatized, they wanted to use the Final Fantasy brand, which was the most powerful brand they had, and just slap that shit on everything. So really, there's two answers to the question, what is Final Fantasy, right? A, Final Fantasy is whatever the fuck Square Enix decides to slap that name on, ends up being Final Fantasy. Or if you really want to be a purist about it, Final Fantasy is whatever its creator Hironobu Sakaguchi had a hand in creating, and he hasn't made a Final Fantasy thing since 9. So just to get that out of the way, my frustration, I think the comparison to Final Fantasy is stupid, even though it takes inspiration from Final Fantasy. Obviously, you can compare it to Final Fantasy, but I think using it to like bash Final Fantasy and just make bad faith arguments about it is really stupid, especially in this. There are turn-based games out there. I've played several over the past several years. Octopath Traveler is fucking awesome. Chained Echoes rules. Like, go out and play some of these other turn-based games. Like, Final Fantasy is not the end-all be-all of turn-based RPGs. It's just not. And this kind of slides into my next point is, why can't the game be discussed on its own term, its own merit? Why does its value have to be in relation to other games like Game of the Year or all these contenders? Or why does its value have to be defined as a proof of how bad gaming or Final Fantasy is? Because that doesn't allow us to have the conversations on why Expedition 33 is so great, because it tells really, really deep, emotionally connective themes that we all as humans experience on this planet in different ways. The way that the gameplay and the story and the music and the visuals all interact to create this really unique piece of art that has never existed before. That's not the discussion that's happening. Like, we're having these surface level discussions about it's Game of the Year because it's better than X game, and X game. And this is what Final Fantasy should be. This is what Final Fantasy would be if Final Fantasy was good. That's just rage baiting, surface level conversations. Like, it's not allowing you to appreciate and engage with the art on its terms. You're engaging with the art through the lens of like every other RPG that's been made or every game of that year, or through Final Fantasy, when, yes, Final Fantasy may have influenced Expedition 33, but it is not the lens through which you should view Expedition 33. You need to be able to talk about why you like the game in terms of its own value, in terms of what the game does, not in terms of what other games do badly. And that is like the bulk of mainstream conversation. It is not on the specific things about the game that are good, the way that the music, the art direction, the gameplay all work together, the incredible voice cast, right? People are only just like, oh yeah, it's got Charlie Cox in it, it's got Ben Starr, but then the way that the nuances of the way that their performances were done is incredible. Andy Serkis has an interview where he breaks down like the entire process of playing his character and how it's different from the work he's done in Lord of the Rings and Planet of the Apes. And he talks about how in those movies he had to do the motion capture along with the actual acting. And in doing Expedition 33, he talks about how when he showed up, like all the motion capture was already done and all the animation had already been started to be worked on for his character Renoir. And for him, it was a challenge to go from doing the motion capture and being able to like fully physically embody the character he's playing, whether that's Gollum or Caesar or any of that, and try to tailor his performance to kind of match what was going on with the motion cap. And that was a new challenge for him in his career. And that's gives me like a whole new dimension to like all of the work that goes into creating a character like Renoir. But no, that it can only, the conversation on Expedition 33 can only exist in the context of Game of the Year or in terms of how bad Final Fantasy is or how bad the gaming industry is. So that's the discussion we have to have. When the discussion we should be having is on this incredible piece of art and the way that Guillaume Roche and his team were able to bring together all of the legacy art forms through like this French influence and craft this experience that is sad and melancholy and hopeful and a mirror of humanity and is a commentary on how we all approach grief differently and how if you don't deal with grief, it can be corrosive, it can be destructive, if it can be something that you can't move past, and there are consequences for that. That is the conversation that we need to be happening. And in the lens of that conversation, then you can say it's because of those reasons. That is why I think this game should be Game of the Year. Even though this game, winning or losing Game of the Year, I don't think changes its standing at all. Because, can you tell me the Game of the Year from 30 years ago? Was it your favorite game? Was it the game you thought should have won? Or is that game from 30 years ago just a really, really good game, a really good example of what that game was 30 years ago? We place so much weight on Game of the Year now as it's some kind of like enhancer, when Game of the Year is a completely arbitrary, like feeling-based award that is subjective because everybody is going to have an experience that is different. And I think people kind of get into this mainstream mindset of once people start calling something a Game of the Year, they have to be like, oh yeah, this game is good because it is Game of the Year. It's like, no, this game deserves to be Game of the Year because it is good, and these are the reasons why. Clair Obscur is a work of video game art that deserves to be pondered, to be examined, to be analyzed and experienced and thought over, and not used for the great gamer war. My closing thoughts on Clair Obscur Expedition 33, and how do I kind of wrap everything up without fully expressing my thoughts on the story as to not spoil it, because that analysis will once again be over on my YouTube channel. And how do I talk about it in a kind of legacy and historical context like I like to when I close out my episodes, because it's a game that is not even 1 year old. It came out this year. The gaming industry is in a really tough space. I will admit that. I'm not going to use Clair Obscur to bash it, because I think there are many, many innumerable terrible problems with the way big video games are made in this day and age. More than just, oh, they're bad, they're woke, and all this bullshit that people like break things down to. There is a systemic problem of shareholder-driven value chasing that affects the way that the most biggest video games are made. And that should be the start of any discussion about what is wrong with the modern video game industry, is people at the top chasing profits over creating something that is fun and engaging and tells a meaningful and deep story. In terms of where Expedition 33 stands today, and just kind of maybe looking down the road 5-10 years and where I think it'll stand in terms of video game history, there are certain games that come along and you just kind of know right off the bat from playing them that this is an exceptional example of what video games are at this point in time. And I think that Expedition 33 is one of those games. It's something that as soon as you kind of start it and fire it up and you're sitting on the main menu and listening to the main menu theme, that you kind of get the sense that this is not an average everyday gaming experience that you're about to have. Even if it's something you played for a little bit and it didn't entirely click with you, or you didn't like it, or you dropped off of it, I think most people would still be able to tell that this is an experience that is not the norm for the video game industry. And this is represented by everything that I talked about today, in the way that the game was developed, the unusual way that the game was developed, the way that Guillaume Broche was able to build his team and kind of build this thing in the way they wanted and have such an incredible team that all had the same vision and were determined to execute that vision. That being one of the advantages of having a smaller core team versus a 500-person dev team on a big AAA video game, is that smaller teams are able to communicate more efficiently and all kind of get on the same page about the vision and execute to that vision. That is the advantage of having a smaller team. So I think, if anything, this will be looked upon as a video game that at this time was the best example of the potential of video games at this moment, in terms of their storytelling and their music and their art direction and the voice work and the voice acting. Like, this is like the fullest, the most fulfilled version of video games in my mind when I think about what video games are. That is what Expedition 33 is. And I think it will be looked upon as that 5-10 years down the road as an example of the best of this time period, and hopefully a turning point to better practices, telling better stories in an industry that is, people are in the industry and they want to tell stories, but a lot of direction from the boardroom members and CEOs are make game that makes money. And there's not a lot of room for compromise or creative expression when those are the constraints under which you have to create. And I think Expedition 33 will go on to be a fine example of the potential of video games as far as we've brought them up until this point. And I think this will be a game that maybe when my kids grow up, or my kids' generations grow up, and they're making podcasts and stuff, and if TikTok and videos haven't completely rotted our brains by then, they will look back and go, oh yeah, Expedition 33 was a marquee game at a time when there was trouble in the industry, and the time that the industry was undergoing a difficult time, and maybe a time that the industry is now transitioning for. In the same way that we go back and we look at Final Fantasy VII or Chrono Trigger or games from that era and say, oh yeah, these games were transformative pieces of art important to their medium at the time, and they were truly the best example of what was available at that time. And that is the reason why they're still very highly thought of today, even though technology has gotten better and outclasses those games today. If this episode hasn't been enough to convince you, please, even if it's not your cup of tea, even if you're hesitant about a turn-based combat, if you're someone that likes Souls games, I think that the interactive nature of the combat with parrying and dodging and the QuickTime button inputs will be able to engage you enough to kind of overcome your bias against turn-based games. I would just urge you, please, at the $50 price point, and I assume this game will probably go on sale, sometime in the future. This is a game worth spending money on, worth trying out, because I truly believe it is kind of the best representation of what we have for video games right now in a way that they should be made properly. And I think there's a potential for us to have the really, really good, proper conversations about why this game is great, why video games are great. And I think Expedition 33 can be a catalyst that makes more people think about games more in more terms than just game of the year, in terms of this is why Final Fantasy sucks, in terms of this is why the industry sucks. So go and play Expedition 33. I highly, highly recommend it. With that being said, and with the endless onslaught of fireworks that I hope you can't hear in the background, that is going to bring this episode to a close. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me, as always, and sticking through more of a ranty episode than I intended it to be. Usually my episodes don't devolve into rants, but those were the things I really wanted to talk about for the podcast portion. As I've said, I'm going to have a YouTube portion of this episode that will debut sometime next month. That is going to be an essay on some of the themes, some of the emotional connections that I made with the game, and just some things that I thought about it, that if I tried to fit into a podcast, I would still be sitting here like 3 or 4 hours from now just talking about everything that I thought about. So if you want to, check out all the socials and subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you can be here when that video comes out. You can go to linktr.ee/Unlockables podcast. All the links for all my socials are there. YouTube. Click on the link to join the Discord channel. We have some really, really fun conversations in there. If you join the Discord channel, you can record a snippet of the game that we're talking about and have it featured on the Unlockables. That is the way that I am doing my community engagement, considering that it's difficult for me to have guests on the show. So I would highly recommend checking that out. And then obviously the pod is available wherever podcasts are found. So with that being said, always remember, it's not just a story of video games. It is a story of you and for those who come after.
Vacarme s'en va dans l'oubli éternel, et Gustave dom guardiam dilim didididim lutessera dorilom seram dim dim da 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 dim da 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 dim da di dum dim dim da 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 dim da 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 dim da di dum. Dans là-haut sera ravi les toits à ceux.
Yeah, Steve, stay cool here. I wasn't going to bother you none until I saw the title of your little podcast, Clair Obscur. But it's an interesting little pivot you got going from talking about video games to true crime. I just couldn't help but think about her, Clair Osborne. And look, I know that's not how you spell it, but sometimes names change. People change. You know, some of us have to change. Claire and I, we were close back in the day. You know, like when you meet someone and they know the real you. Like before the court dates and the restraining orders. Yeah, that was me and Claire. Carved our names in the back of a laser tag arena, probably under there. All that asbestos. But yeah, she made a mixtape once. All Guns N' Roses, all 12 tracks except the last one. Last one was 4 minutes and 19 seconds of silence. And you want to know why? You want to know what she told me? She said, in case we need to run. and run we did. You know, let me just say, Claire and I had our own little turn-based fun, if you know what I mean. At least 33 times. You know, you take your shot, she takes hers. Next thing you know, you're hiding behind a stack of milk crates behind a bowling alley. Well, anyway, the thing is, Evan, Claire's gone. She's been gone. And you don't need to ask around or nothing. You don't need to be poking your nose into things that don't need to be smelt. Don't look into it. You're just gonna stir things up with your little podcast. And I mean, yeah, sure, people say things. That I was the last one to see her. That I had keys to a storage unit. Look, Evan, I'm not saying she's not out there. I'm just saying that if she is, she don't want to be found. Especially not by you. So, yeah. Expedition 33, is that what you're calling this? You know, maybe you don't need to play this one. Maybe you don't. Maybe you need to let it go. I said what I needed to say. And for the record, I gotta go.